Good evening. Thanks for being here on a very lovely Thursday evening. My name is Matt Carter. I'm a professor in the biology department and currently serving as the director of the Rice Center for Teaching here at Williams. The Rice Center's mission is to create opportunities and resources that ultimately promote and enrich the quality of learning experiences throughout campus. And as you are all aware, this evening's topic, generative AI, has had a tremendous impact on how we learn, how we acquire knowledge, how we communicate, and how we engage with our academic and non-academic work. Since the emergence 3 years ago of popular AI platforms such as ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude, teachers and students alike have been confronted with AI's ability to generate text that mimics human writing. Sometimes clumsy, sometimes inadequate, but sometimes seemingly insightful. These tools have challenged long-standing assumptions about originality, creativity, and what it means to demonstrate learning. After ChatGPT's release in late 2022, educators immediately began asking urgent questions. What should we gain from the act of writing beyond producing polished text? Is writing primarily about communicating ideas or about discovering and shaping them? How does writing help us develop voice, creativity, and critical thinking, and can AI meaningfully participate in those processes? Taken together, how should we think about writing in the age of AI? After a long career as a writer, editor, and writing teacher, John Warner sees the existence of generative AI applications like ChatGPT not as a threat, but as an opportunity to break students out of bad writing habits and instead empower them to develop enduring writing practices. For more than a dozen years, he's been blogging weekly at Inside Higher Ed and has also been a weekly columnist for the Chicago Tribune. He's the author of The Writer's Practice, Building Confidence in Your Nonfiction Writing, Why They Can't Write, Killing the Five-Paragraph Essay, and Other Necessities. And most recently, More Than Words, How to Think About Writing in the Age of AI, which is available at the Williams College bookstore. In More Than Words, John writes, quote, "What ChatGPT and other large language models are doing is not writing and shouldn't be considered as such. Writing is thinking. Writing involves both the expression and exploration of an idea, meaning that even as we're trying to capture the idea on the page, the idea may change based on our attempts to capture it. Removing thinking from writing renders an act not writing. Writing is also feeling, a way for us to be invested and involved not only in our own lives, but the lives of others and the world around us. Reading and writing are inextricable, and outsourcing our reading to AI is essentially a choice to give up on being human." Joining John in conversation is Julia McKenzie, director of the Writing Center here at Williams. An accomplished writer herself, Julia is the author of The Bookkeeper, a memoir of race, love, and legacy. Her essays have appeared in several journals, including the Masters Review, Solstice Literary Magazine, and Inside Higher Education. In early 2023, just after ChatGPT captured the public's attention, Julia wrote one of the first insightful articles for Inside Higher Education about the use of AI in writing, in which she wrote, quote, "Writing, rewriting, and revision work. The process helps you think. Students, don't rob yourself of the chance to understand and expand your own brain. Writing is thinking. Practice one to sharpen the other." Following tonight's conversation, there'll be time for plenty of questions from the audience. John and Julia, thank you very much for being here tonight, and we look forward to the conversation.
Hello. How do these work?
Mine's on.
Is mine on?
Yeah.
Yay. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. The lights are really bright. I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I might move the flowers. Is that going to make anyone sad? So I can see John. Okay, that seems better. And I want to thank John for coming here tonight and talking to us about this really important thing that's happening in all of our lives. I'll admit that I spend most of my time thinking about AI, wishing I wasn't thinking about AI. I thought about asking John just one question tonight, and that was, can I just put my head in the sand and pretend it's not happening? but I'm not going to ask you that. So you don't have to prepare an answer. That's not realistic. So instead, I just want to open by mentioning kind of some current context, some of it about writing, some of it not. As a lot of you know, there's a chorus right now of faculty from different colleges and universities across the country and probably the world writing about AI heralding the end of college as we know it. Some of whom are calling on college administrators to ban AI outright. Just last week in The Atlantic, we had somebody suggesting we go back to the Ethernet so that there could be no Wi-Fi access. Some are pointing to the contradictions of colleges and universities, on one hand creating bespoke AI tools of their own, and on the other hand, telling students that they're cheating if they use AI, and they're asking for a coherent policy. The MIT Media Lab recently released a study about the cognitive cost of using AI, pointing to weaker brain connectivity, poorer memory recall, and less ownership over the content that they wrote. Still others are pointing to a correlation between cheating really broadly, but also with AI, and a decline in mental health and well-being. You can kind of see where I'm going with this. I don't know if anybody else listened to The Daily on Tuesday, but there was a segment that they did about people with previous mental health developing delusions through their conversations with AI, and some really tragic stories about ChatGPT walking some of our young people right up to the and sometimes through the door of suicide. So this is a pretty serious thing we're talking about today, and it's not just about writing. Add to that the profound impacts this technology is having on the environment, and it's pretty hard for me to find anything positive to say about it. And I know we're here to talk about writing, but I do feel like this is all important context to establish that this tech goes far beyond writing, but that writing is really at its core. And that's, I think, John and I are going to agree that that's probably because writing is at the core of everything. So I just want to say, I think we're experiencing an interruption in thinking, not that different from the one we experienced in the pandemic when schools were closed to learning. And I think this is a similar interruption in learning. I'm going to paraphrase John when I say, we're just humans trying to human. And this technology isn't human, and it's kind of getting in the way. So I'm going to start, John, by asking you if we can talk a little bit about why we ask students to write. We're going to start with that sort of general question. If you want to veer into whether institutions should help create clearer policies on this.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, just I'm just sitting here reflecting on what you said, and what's interesting to me is that this technology is winnowing its way into where there is an absence. And so somebody who reaches out to like a chatbot for a friend and lapses into psychosis because of it, something is missing there, right? I think the thing about writing, like why we teach writing, my experience teaching college writing for many years, and for quite a few of those years, in the later part of my career, mostly talking to students about writing as I was teaching writing, was that we had allowed an absence to creep into how we viewed writing in school contexts, which is sort of purely instrumentally, as this is a way to demonstrate that you're a good student, often through sort of a standardized format, right? Writing a 5-paragraph essay. Or if you're an extra smart student, you take an AP class where you write a 5-paragraph essay on the exam. And so we instrumentalized writing as this thing that's going to be a proxy for good student, smart student, whatever. And I started seeing all these, I'm sure you've seen this too, I started seeing all these behaviors in my students that were inconsistent with what I knew to be writing, where, and this is an old one that's probably out of date now, but it's the old control click or right click on a word where you call up the thesaurus and you choose a different word from the list. So you take the simple word and you like a fancy word, right? And so my students are submitting the stuff where there's all of a sudden, like out of nowhere, there's just a word like, you don't even know what that word means. Or you would, not that they wouldn't know what it means, you would never use this word in the context of the thing they're trying to communicate. And I would bust them, and I ask, why are you doing this? It's like, oh, my teacher used to love that. Because it was like a performance of smartness. Like, look at this word I know. And I wrote a piece on it years ago at Inside Higher Ed on the problem of pseudo-academic BS, where the student had internalized the ideas to sound smart, to sound academic. And I being the way I am, I started thinking like, dang, how often do I feel like I have to do that also, right? A sort of performance of this. And so, like, why do we teach, like, the question is like, why do we teach writing? I mean, it's a good question, right? Like,
The question is, why do we ask them to write? What if we even don't have to teach writing?
Like, in some cases, we're probably asking students to write where we shouldn't be, where there's actually other activities that would better assess what they do or don't know. But we allowed it to become this proxy that if you can express yourself fluently, you must be smart or you must know what you're talking about. And as I was talking in my earlier talk for faculty and at dinner, I was a serial bullshitter in college, and I took the in-class exams because you didn't have to know anything. You just had to be able to pretend convincingly. And so, boy, you've shaken me up here, because it's like maybe we should, like, I don't want to say we should write less, but when we write, it should matter, right? There should be some meaning and stakes, not in the grade sense, but stakes in the like, is this something that me as a unique human intelligence can put on the page? Rather than, is this another performance that I'm a smart student who deserves an A? Which I think, you're in the trenches more than I am. I mean, this seems like a lot of what we ask students to do is that performance.
Right. And so it seems almost as though what you're saying is, we need to be asking ourselves more, why write in this instance?
When I come and do these events and I talk to faculty, and one of the things, I forgot to say it today, but I say I'm easy to find. If you have questions or you want to run stuff by me, just reach out and we'll do a Zoom. And multiple times over the last year, somebody has sent me their writing assignment and said, not a writing teacher, but like a non-writing course. I said, well, I'm trying to test this, and this. And I look at it and we read and I talk about it, and the end of the conversation is this shouldn't be a writing assignment. In one case, it should have been a multiple choice test, which we think of as a kind of disfavored tool, but for what this faculty person at this institution and this subject was trying to test, which was really just straight up knowledge acquisition, right? Did they know stuff? You can write an excellent multiple choice test with difficult answers that require you to discern between fine-grained things that test knowledge. These tests are well proven for that. And so I can't say it felt great being a writing guy, like, oh, I wish we could prove that writing matters here, but it didn't matter there, right? I mean, we have to think about what are we trying to discern? What is the thing we're trying to uncover when we ask students to do the work? I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, agreed. And so almost to flip that on its head, when we do ask students to write, you write in your book, and I'm going to turn this question on you, what's wrong with people who don't enjoy writing, finding relief in a tool that completes this unpleasant task for them? So here we are in a scenario where we have asked them to write. It's a good thing that we've asked them to do it, but how do we get them interested in a skill that they now don't necessarily need to learn?
Yes. Part of this is, this may be heresy, like, I don't think writing, I like writing. Like, it's very popular for writers to complain about writing, right? Like, oh, I gotta go and sweat over the keyboard until blood comes out of my eyeballs, and then I squeak out 16 words and call it a day. And there's a long tradition of writers saying, I don't like writing, but I like having written,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. But one of the things I worked with my students over the years was to convince them that you may not like the fact of writing, the instance of writing, but that writing under meaningful contexts that require you to extend your unique intelligence, that allow you to uncover knowledge that you possessed but was hidden to yourself until you expressed it, this is actually deeply pleasurable and unique to people. It's a capacity that we have that certainly AI does not have, since it does not know anything. And really, I think the challenge is a lot of, like, school often gets in the way of that. And I think we could do better to show students that it doesn't have to be that way, and that even if you don't like writing in the moment, there's a satisfaction in that. And ultimately, you may discover that writing is not your preferred way of achieving that, but that it can be done with writing, and now you can apply this to other contexts as well, other ways of thinking and other ways of revealing knowledge to yourself, because that's how I think of writing. Like, when I sit down to write something, I spent this morning writing my Chicago Tribune column, writing about a book I just read called Heart the Lover. It's a kind of sequel to an earlier book called Writers and Lovers by the author Lily King. I read this thing on the plane, and I got so
I just figured
emotional
out
at the
it's
end.
Lily King.
Yeah, yeah.
That's who we know in common. There you go.
I figured it out.
Sorry, please continue.
The end was so emotional that I was like crying in my seat on the plane, and the poor guy next to me, I'm like doing this, like, and the thing is, like, is it a good book? Like, artistically, it's manipulative as hell. It's like, I could find all kinds of flaws in my critical self, but that thing just overwhelmed my human senses. And so I sat down today to figure out, like, what did this book do, and why did it do it? Am I a sucker? Like, I'm just easily moved? You know, like, show me a puppy on a commercial, and I'm a...
Is there anything wrong with this?
Yeah, I'm a puddle of emotion at that. But it's really like, so that, like, why do I felt this? Why do I think this? Can I articulate to someone else? I just think that's sort of, at least to me, I think that's fundamentally interesting. And if you can attach that to whatever realm you're interested in, I think you'll find some measure of pleasure in, if not writing, having written.
So, but there are faculty in the audience, right? How do they encourage that level of pleasure in students?
Well, we were in the earlier talk. We were talking about this fascination. I mean, the thing I think I do see some students in the audience. You have no idea, like, how into their subjects your professors are. They are freakish maniacs for what is extremely esoteric, narrow subject matter. And yet, they are dedicating their lives to studying, understanding, and conveying this material. And faculty, I think you just have to let that freak flag fly and not assume students are going to be interested in it because you are, because it's fascinating. But one of the things I like to do when I go around place to place is I will ask people about what they do, and I'll say, like, what's the most interesting thing you know about your subject? And it is a 100%, 1,000% batting average that when they articulate that, I am interested, as just a regular, normal layperson who is not at all conversant with their subject. So coming from that point of fascination, and I should extend, a fascination embedded in a deep, deep expertise and knowledge, and to be able to convey that, like, this is yours for the taking as well. Not my subject, that's mine, right? But demonstrating that you, the student, the young person, can find your thing through this process, I think it's hugely powerful. I mean, I'm grateful to the handful of professors I had. I went to a large state university. I went to the University of Illinois, where my professors could not have cared about me at all. The entire institution could not give two shits about its students. We're just there to like fill up the place. But I had like a couple of professors that took a genuine interest in me as a person and absolutely altered the trajectory of my life that led to me like being in this place today. At a place like Williams, you could have that like in every class, right? So I think that's the unique human exchange. That's something an AI just could not, an AI is not interested in anything.
Yeah.
It has no expertise. It has a lot of syntax related to those things.
John, relates sort of to what you were saying, but you and I agree that, and I tell students all the time, you write about this really clearly, that writing is thinking. I was really compelled in your book by the idea that writing is also feeling, and I'm wondering if you can explain that concept a bit and how it relates to AI not being able to feel.
So, this Lily King book, Heart the Lover That Moved Me to Tears, like, maybe this is embarrassing, but like, I've moved myself to tears right?
Me too.
By surprise.
Yeah.
Did not know it was going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, I was writing a scene in my novel. A character who's nothing like me, where he's a stand-up comedian who gets famous on a gimmick. He does impressions with his hand shoved all the way in his mouth. So all of his impressions sound exactly the same, but in the context of the book, he gets very, very famous. It's intentionally absurd. In the book, I give him a dying father that just came up, and I conjured a scene from my father's own passing. And it was 6 years after my father had died. I did not mourn in that physical way at the time of his death as I did when I was writing my own book, right? You can, I routinely write about my experience teaching, like at Inside Higher Ed, and I will recall a student that I had a decade ago, and they will reappear before me as though they're present. And they are present because we intersected with each other for the course of this thing. It's a very powerful experience. I gave I'll repeat my anecdote from my earlier talk with the faculty when I was at, during the pandemic, I was shopping in the grocery store when it was still like one-way traffic in the aisles and all masked up and distancing, and there was a Post-it with a grocery list on it on the floor, and I picked it up and I was sort of worried about it because like somebody's lost their list, but I'm like, I'm staying away from people. But I looked at the list and it was just regular stuff, except at the bottom it said cherry Pop-Tarts, all caps, underline, 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 exclamation point, exclamation point. And so here was the most mundane of written objects you can imagine, a grocery list. There was actually, for the person writing the list, in the moment of recording cherry Pop-Tarts, all caps, underline, 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 exclamation point, exclamation point, they were connected to that person in their household in that moment, where the most important thing in the world was coming home with cherry Pop-Tarts. And so, where a large language model is a tool of automation, and it is tempting to automate what we perceive as mundane, or something like student recommendations, right? Just make recommendation bot do that because they're such a pain. But when you write a recommendation for a student, you are not only thinking of the student, you're also thinking of who you were when you taught that student and what you did with that student. And to outsource these things, like even a grocery list or a recommendation letter, is a kind of choice to self-alienate. And I just think it's a big mistake. And the impulse to do so, again, thinking about your very thought-provoking initial thoughts, it's an absence, right? I'm sorry Student, I'm going to outsource your recommendation to recommendation bot because I don't have time. The absence is time. I'm going to have this grade your essay because I don't have time, absence of time. So the problems that the technology is proposing to solve, and solving them in this way, has the potential to actually increase the problem. Or it may solve the surface level problem. Those recommendations are getting written, sent in on time, but over time what happens when the student is interacting with the bot writes the recommendation. What is this? There's a movie, I don't know if people, this is more of a Gen X thing. There's a movie called Real Genius. Does anyone remember this movie? It's very worth seeing. It stars Val Kilmer. And they're at like a Cal Poly type place. They're the most brilliant students, like engineering and science students in the land. And they start, because they're busy doing their projects and don't have time to go to class, they start putting like tape recorders in their lectures. And so you see, it's a recurring scene where the professor is up on stage and there's like 30 students, and then there's 20, and then there's 5, and then it's just tapes, and the professor's lecturing to it. And the final gag in the movie is there's a tape on the professor's desk playing with all the other stuff doing. This movie came out in like, I don't know, 1981 or something like that. So this is the conception of this is not in any way new, and yet we're kind of accelerating into it with maybe a fascination because of the sophistication of the technology, but that fascination shouldn't like overrule our good sense for our humanity.
Well, so let's flip the script a little bit and talk about why students might use it, right? You've talked about it filling an absence, right? And I think in many cases, the absence it fills for students is also time.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I want to sort of think, or have you think about the slippery slope of, I'm just going to ask ChatGPT to outline, and then sort of what happens from there, or I'll just have it do my first draft, and then I'll like human it up a little bit. What pitfalls are students falling into if they do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's all thinking. An outline is thinking. The draft is, I mean, the first draft is like where most of the thinking happens, right? The reason why I wrote a whole book attacking the 5-paragraph essay is because to slot students into that template denies them a significant part of the thinking you do as writing, which is structure. How do I organize my thoughts in such a way as to impact my audience? So time is an absence. I think with students, it's often an absence of confidence. Sometimes it's an absence of, they just don't know what to do, right? Many times over the course of my career, I thought I had been beyond clear over the objective of the writing assignment in front of my students, and I would have office hours, and I would have a student come in where it was clear between the two of us that I had not been clear, right? They didn't know what they were trying to do. And so when, Matt's introduction where I see ChatGPT as an opportunity, this is an opportunity, right, where we can identify those gaps, those absences. We can seek to fill them in. If time is an absence, what is available to us to give us time, right? Like in my own teaching over the years, again, before ChatGPT, I started doing less and less and less in my classes, but spending more time on those things, those activities, to make them deeper and richer. Because yes, there was not enough time. Like you couldn't write a good 15-page research paper in first year writing. We were all disappointed by it. So let's do something else, right? Let's do something that's meaningful. The temptations are like anything else. Like this is hard in the moment, or something is easier, I want to do something else, and this is there for me. And the hard part about this technology, it's ever present, it's free in a lot of cases, or very cheap, and no one's going to catch you. So it's on you to sort of maintain that. I mean, it's a cliche, like the only person you're cheating is yourself.
Yeah.
But it's
a cliche based on my piece in Inside
Higher
Higher Ed, but it is a cliche. To your point about no one's going to catch you, like, yes, and like the faculty member could raise their hands and say, like, yes, I know when I'm reading something that ChatGPT wrote, right? Like, raise some hands, faculty.
But it's hard to prove.
It's hard to prove. And so the act becomes even more transactional than it already was. And so what's happening to college writing that it is the transaction that matters more? I'm going to cheat, I'm going to get away with it, I'm going to get an A, I can move on, I have more time for this other thing. And in many cases, I think the other thing is just as important. It's something for another class, right? And so it's harder to say, well, I'll just not write a 15-page paper, not assign a 15-page paper, I'll assign a 5-page paper. Students don't have that freedom. So how do we convince them that even still, they shouldn't use it?
It's an investment. I mean, it really is it's a long game. And you never know what experience is going to ultimately be the thing that changes your life, right? Like, I can like just seriously freak myself out if I start thinking like what if this didn't happen? Where would I be? In fact, I have a writing assignment I would give my students to do something like that. I would have, I talked about this in the faculty thing too, an alternate history assignment where they'd have to write an alternate history for like a historical event. After they did that, I'm like, you're gonna write an alternate personal history where something that changed you, right? Changed something and write your life. And these are even very young people, 18 years old, and they still could be like freak themselves out.
Sure.
For me as a middle-aged person, like I think, like I met my wife because I picked up a phone that wasn't mine, like literally, and I'm like, what? And I don't believe like in fate or anything like that. It's just that happened, and then these other things happened, and if we get in this pattern of least resistance, right, which is really what you're just like, I can get rid of this hurdle by deploying this technology. We lose the capacity to truly discern when is this a true help to us, or when is it harming us? It becomes easier and easier. We were talking about biking over dinner, right? E-bikes are a fantastic invention. They open up the world to people to ride distances and places that they otherwise couldn't do. But if we only ever rode e-bikes, we would be shorting ourselves on what our capacities are for biking, right? It's not like a moralistic thing. I just have a very practical view of it. Like, do you want to go through your life being a dumbass who doesn't know how to do things and has to rely on this technology to fill in a gap that you refuse to do for yourself? And it's okay, it's fine to have like limits, like human limits, like that okay, I can do this, but I can't go beyond that. Right. What's wrong with that, right? Like I play the drums in a band. I am perfectly acceptable. I have a drum teacher, I look at him and I'm like, how is he so good? He works harder at it and he's more talented than I am. But it's okay, right? Like I don't need to go get DrumBot to play for me because I'm not good enough. We have to be able to be accepting of these things. And again, the hard part is like school makes us feel like maybe that's not okay because it's going to be short of an A.
Right.
That's on us, and when I say us, not the students, like the faculty, be like, how do we make space for like the best effort being worth something that's meaningful to students?
Yeah. So I just want to change gears a little bit. This is a notion I reject, playing my hand, but I'm going to ask you to talk about it anyway,
Sure.
Which is the argument that it is on us as faculty, as staff working with students, to teach them how to use this technology.
it's sticky because it's like, use it to do what, right? The use of this technology is hugely context dependent. And I have been demonstrated many positive uses of this. I'll actually describe one. It's local to here. My wife and I vacationed in the Berkshires in July, and we made plans to go to the Norman Rockwell Museum. Anyone been? I recommend it. It's pretty cool. And by coincidence, I have a great uncle. His name was Alan Seeger, who was a writer. He died before I was born, so I never knew him. But he was sort of a very well-known, not super well-known, but an accomplished writer in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. He was once called by the original editor of the Best American Short Stories volume the apostolic heir to the American short story following Sherwood Anderson and Ernest Hemingway. He said, this guy, Alan Seeger, is next. Now, you've never heard of him, so it didn't work out that way. He is forgotten except by me. I've written about him a couple times. But he published numerous stories in the Saturday Evening Post that Norman Rockwell did the covers on. And again, because I'm an idiot and I don't plan for anything, I didn't know like when his stories were, I didn't know what. But I got on ChatGPT and I said, I would like to know in which issues of the Saturday Evening Post have stories by Alan Seeger, because if there was a cover, they would show like story by Alan Seeger on the cover. I wanted to like be able to do it. And it did this while I was sitting in the lobby of the Norman Rockwell Museum using their Wi-Fi. And this is work I could do. Like, I know how to access the proper databases, list out, and I actually do already have my great uncle's bibliography, so I could have gotten that and just correlated it. It would have taken me several hours at the least, right? It did this in several minutes. Turns out, never illustrated a cover that my great uncle had a story in, but he did illustrate one of my great uncle's stories in the interior of the magazine, which I did not know. I go on eBay and I have that copy ordered before I even get out of the parking lot, right? So how to use this technology? All I did was ask it a question, so it's like, it's not hard. But the use is, what are we trying to do with it? So how to use this technology is not like how to interface, I don't think, from my point of view. It's not how to interface with a chatbot. It's what is the genuine utility of what this technology can do, and how does it intersect with what you need? And when it comes to writing, I think it's axiomatic that the more you can do in the absence of the tool, the more likely the tool could be genuinely useful to you rather than that outsourcing you described. And so when in a learning context, writing especially, like this stuff just has no utility to me. The like, oh, you're gonna like polish a draft, like no. You're going to get, this is a little bit controversial, but there's some experiments around combining large language model feedback with peer feedback with instructor feedback and comparing it and this kind of stuff. These experiments are interesting to me, and I just read three new studies about this last weekend. And they're of mixed results, right? Some showing some benefits, some not so much. But the thing I personally could not get past every time I'm looking at these studies is this thing does not read. I do not care. I personally cannot care about what a large language model says about my writing, because I write to be read by human beings who are intersecting with my unique intelligence. And when people say, well, it's helpful to students, I want helpful with what? And it's always, it helps them do better on the assignment criteria. And I just want to challenge, not saying they're wrong, but challenge in the sense like, does that criteria matter? Does it matter? And it might. Like I'm open to the idea that we can come up with some clever ways of prompting this feedback that really does get students thinking deeply about their writing. And I've seen writers who like, oh yeah, use it as my thought partner. I'm like, how do you do that? because that doesn't make any sense to me, because that thing doesn't think. So how is it your thought partner? And it's really just them talking to themselves through this vehicle in the way like I walk around talking, like literally talking to myself, right? Or talking to the dog or whatever. And to me, okay, that can be useful. It's like when I was a kid and bored and alone, I would go bang a tennis ball against our garage door with a tennis racket. I'm not playing tennis, but I might be getting better at hitting a tennis ball with a racket. So I think that's, I'm not an abolitionist, but I'm a skeptic about utility, because I always have to know utility at what?
Yeah.
What are we trying to achieve? If I'm trying to like correlate Saturday Evening Post covers with my uncle's writings, this thing is fast and good enough. It might not be comprehensive, but it's certainly good enough for that. So that's the use that I want. I want students, if they're using this technology in like my writing course, to think about it and then come to me with, hey, I was thinking about this issue I'm having in my piece or this research thing I want to do, and I was thinking about using this, or I used it and look what happened. I think that's great. This is a purposeful, agentic, meaningful use. That's the kind of thing that I think we should be teaching students to do. But it's like the mechanics of it, I don't think so. It's really just getting students to think about what they want and then experimenting with the technology, because, if we don't experiment, we'll never discover anything.
Right. And I would actually take it a step further and say, if we're teaching them how to think through writing and through the other things that they're learning in the college experience, then they have the skills they need to, ask it a very simple question.
Mm-hmm.
That this isn't hard.
The whole thing is adaptive, right? You're adapting to changing circumstances. And in some ways it's easier for people of our generation, because like we went to college without the internet, right? I went to college with a typewriter. I wasn't online until after graduate school. And so when all of a sudden we can search online, because I have the experience of like the card catalog and the Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature, or dedicated databases at a library, I actually know what's happening. Like I have a concept of that. And I find often my students, when I would teach like research in my first year writing class, they would think like the library search bar, like that's a magic box where magic things happen. And so we would have to back up and like, let's bring in a librarian and we're gonna actually talk about what that's doing. And we're gonna go walk around and look at the books. And one of my favorite assignments was to like find the call numbers for like a subject they're interested in. I'm like, go just look at the books in that row and pick out the title that sounds most interesting to you. And they would start to see like information is organized according to principles, and there's ideas and there's relationships. It's not just a magic box that surfaces things. And so I think that's part of the challenge for this technology. It's not just a magic box that surfaces things. It's working on somewhat mysterious, but also understandable mechanisms.
Yeah.
And the more we know about that, I think the better, because we can put the technology in its proper context.
I want to ask you one more question before we open it up to the audience. You say in your book that we do not have to treat AI as inevitable, that we're not powerless to resist future developments in this technology. And I just wonder if you want to speak a little bit about.
I hope so.
You sound very hopeful in your book.
Well, I'm not naive. Like all right, so here's the truth. I have a very low opinion of humankind, collectively.
Yeah.
I think collectively we are a pestilence, put on this earth to destroy it and each other, ultimately. That's our nature, right? That's my view of humankind. Except I have an incredibly high opinion of human individuals, because I've been repeatedly demonstrated the capacity for humans to grant each other charity and grace and compassion and sacrifice and mutual exchange and these sorts of things. So I think like if we can get out of the way of our collective awfulness and concentrate on like what is the thing that is interesting to me? What is fulfilling to me? What is the life I want to live? What is like, how do I wake up in the morning looking forward to what I have to do that day? We will, I think, discover a proper place for this technology in our lives, which I think is much less than what the developers want, who, you know, if you look at like what Sam Altman says about what he sees as the utopian ideal, is much closer to what has been portrayed in films as dystopian, right? A sort of Wall-E existence where we float around and look at stuff and drink extra large sodas or something, right? If you know the humans in Wall-E. I don't think that's what people want. I know it's not what I want in my life. I don't want to have like, I don't want all my problems taken away by AI so I don't have to have a life, right? Like this, so if we believe that we can be human and do our lives, I think we'll find a place for it. So I don't think it's inevitable. Do I fear like the power and money behind it? Do I fear like what's happening with the government? Like I'm terrified. Like I wake up every morning like, when are we going to arrest this? Yeah. But ultimately, if we're going to arrest that stuff, it's going to be up to individuals choosing and then acting collectively as those individuals, I think.
Which means we have to keep thinking for ourselves.
For sure.
Which means we have to keep writing.
For sure.
Let's open it up. I would love for at least a couple of the first questions to come from students. There aren't that many of you in the audience, but I bet some of you have questions. Yes. And I'm going to repeat, so speak loudly, and then I'll repeat so that we can all hear.
Okay, I guess my first question is not so related about AI. I'm thinking more about the grading system where now it's sort of like ranking you based on the GPA. And it's literally just sort of a staple for you. Oh, you know, you're a good product for this company. Do you think this will continue in higher education, or one day we will get rid of this sort of A, B, C, D label and actually evaluate someone as a human being where it's not about the test they do, it's about the conversation they give, the vibe they bring to the classroom condition, who they are as a human being, their kindness, and this sort of actual skills, this sort of the sort of non-graded skills that actually makes individuals thrive in society.
So just in case everybody didn't hear, the question is about grading and the scale, the ABCD scale, and if it can become more humanistic.
Yeah, my answer to that question is I hope it can become that. And there's occasions where it is that. The function of grades as a ranking and sorting of students is not an iron law of the world. We don't have to treat grades, like in my courses at the end of the career, I did not treat grades that way. My grades were determined on the amount learned over the course of the semester by each individual student. So there'd be a student who, on some objective measure, was a superior writer to somebody else, could get the same grade as somebody whose writing was not as objectively strong because they had traveled the same distance on this continuum of learning. But your question about like can work be different from this? It can, because I lived it, right? It was not always this way. When I started my postgraduate school career, I worked in a market research firm that I was utterly unqualified for. I had no paper qualifications for this job, but I had been recommended by somebody else. And the people who worked at the firm believed in, you used the word vibes, it was a vibe. It's like, can this person work with this group and this culture? And so in a market research firm, right, we did research on consumer behavior, basically. How do you get people to buy more? The thing I worked on for the most of my career was Arby's roast beef sandwiches. How do you get people, I was there for the birth of the Market Fresh, if you can believe it. How do you get people to buy more roast beef sandwiches? The people I worked alongside with that, their college degrees, I was a creative writing major. My boss was an art history major. The person junior to me, I think, was like phys ed or something, was like kinesiology major. We'd all wound up at this place, and we were all good at our jobs because it really didn't matter if you didn't, if you were willing to learn the stuff, you're gonna be fine. that just happened to be a sort of enlightened group and management system. But it's not impossible to do. The horrible thing that's happening now in employment, you guys have probably read about this. It's like AI is screening resumes, right? And so people are using AI to get their resume past the AI screener, and you apply for all these jobs and you can't even get past it.
No one's getting hired.
My advice for anybody who works in business is like, that is an idiotic way to hire somebody. Like, you're hiring a human being, you're not hiring a resume.
But I think also the question is about when on the job market, why is my GPA part of that application? At least I intuited that in the question. I don't know if it was
Like,
there.
are you worried about your GPA for getting a job?
To be honest, I'm not very worried about my GPA.
Because it's going to be high.
Because I want to go to nonprofit where they care less about GPA.
Sure.
But I know a lot of my friends who are actually stressed about GPA. And then when you guys talked about how they used, ChatGPT to do some of the work or just make their work better, is because they really need that A
GPA,
because they come
This
from
is the society we've made, but we can unmake it, right? I used to, I would get on my students' cases for worrying about their grades. Be like, come on, give me a break, right? Like, I was a B, I had like a 3.1 or something, and they would mock me for my GPA in college. Like, how are you here? This is impossible. And I'd be like, it's not that big a deal. And I was teaching a public speaking class, and I had a student, he's like, for my persuasive speech, I'm going to persuade you that GPA matters. And for an 8-minute speech, this student got up and crushed my argument by showing all of the ways GPA mattered to students. Scholarships, you needed at least a 3.5 to be an RA in the dorms. Internships, he went and got data for like med school and law school and graduate school admissions. And his concluding slide was a picture of me, and it said, would not get a job today. Like if I was graduating college. Yeah. It shows you the respect my students had for me. We had a good time. But I shut up about it because I was like, okay, you're right. Like we made the world toxic, and now we're making you live in it, right? So part of it is like you younger people, when you like get in those roles, you will have to model something different. Like when I worked at that market research firm and I became like the first cut for resumes, once I'd been there a couple years, I was interviewing like C students where it was clear they were C students because like they were working full time while they were in college. So I'm like, I actually think that person's probably going to be better for us than the straight A student who was grinding away all the time. So it actually gets at the last part, like humanity is horrible. We've made a horrible system, but individuals can decide to defy it, right? Like you can, when you get in a position of power, you can say like, that's not going to matter. I'm not going to care about it.
Yeah. Other questions? Oliver?
Yeah, so you, hopefully, like in contrast to the world's toxicity, you talked about like the connection between writing and feeling. Have you thought about designing assignments where, like, even if the subject matter is more distant or kind of factual or rational, still connecting a student's like emotional reaction to the material and incorporating that into either the writing process or the product itself that can't be kind of bypassed through like a robot or something?
Yes. The question.
Do you want to read?
Yeah, the question was about like in school contexts, injecting some measure of like feeling that's not necessarily like a personal, you're talking like not a personal essay or directly. Yes. So I wrote this book, The Writer's Practice, and it's a book of curriculum, right? It's appropriate for like late high school or early college writing courses. And one of the goals, there's sort of 4 principles for engagement that are part of it, but one of them is like personalization, like am I in it? Can I find myself in it? And so I tried to put that in every single assignment. Like one of the earliest assignments in every writing course I ever taught, regardless of discipline, could be first year writing, technical writing, creative writing, students had to write a review of anything they wanted. Could be a book, a movie, a coffee shop. One of the best ones I ever had, reviewed a purse. It was a student who was majoring in fashion and design and reviewed a purse, and she proposed it to me. I'm like, I don't know. And she's like, trust me, bro, I got this. And she did. It was great. That's a kind of emotional connection, right? Like reviewing an object requires you to be like, to search yourself. What do I think about this? What did I experience with this? Or a concert, like a lot of my students would do like live concerts and what happened to them. We have to have that in our assignments, right? I mean, certainly in a writing class, it's very, very easy in a writing class. It can be tougher in, a discipline where you're writing to demonstrate something else, but like, honestly, why would I write if that's not present? Like and maybe I'm just lucky or I've iterated toward it. I mean, truly, you're probably like this too. Like, I only write things I'm interested in now. I have that luxury. But once I had that luxury, I'm like, well, how do I get my students interested in writing? And it's be genuinely curious about what students have to say about something. It's not.
And let them write about something they're genuinely curious about.
It's not rocket science.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that makes anybody interested in it. But again, school sometimes gets in the way of that.
Yeah. Other questions? Alice?
I've had some friends tell me about having professors who specifically tried to design their writing assignments so that AI not just wouldn't write a good essay about it, but couldn't produce an essay about it. Do you think that that's a possible thing to design, and do you think that it's worth trying to design that?
It's possible to design. It is possible in a combination of the assignment design and the assessment criteria. Like what you grade really makes a difference because you can move your assessment away from the thing the large language model is good at, and towards the thing humans do. But I will tell you that it's very, very difficult, and I was significantly humbled on this front with my book, The Writer's Practice, where after ChatGPT came out, I plugged. Now, in the book, there's each experience, I call them all experiences, they're not assignments. Each experience has drawn out step processes, right? So if you do that, you're gonna have an experience. But I boiled them down to a prompt. And in about 60% of the cases, the thing could churn out something that I probably would have passed. If it wouldn't have, because again, my assessment criteria requires evidence of the process, so it wouldn't have. But if it was just the thing. So it's very hard. My advice to professors is, if that process is a good way for you to figure out what you value, then it's great. But if it's just, I'm trying to trick the machine, I think it's probably not the best use of their time, because ultimately you can contort yourself into weird shapes to leave yourself not vulnerable to that. But is that shape that's left behind something that's worth doing? But who knows? It's an experiment. So you try it and then you see what happens. These are excellent questions.
Yes.
Such good students.
You touched on the structured ways in a way we learn to write in terms of the 5-paragraph essay and AP scoring and that sort of stuff, in the way that we learn to write in a way that's standardized because you are a number in the system. No one's framing writing as thinking and feeling. And I'm wondering how you conceptualize the unlearning of that, or what do you propose as an alternative that would allow more creativity and freedom? This is,
again, the writer's practice. I mean, this is my thing. I figured this stuff out before ChatGPT. I joke. But this was the chief challenge of my work teaching first-year writing, because my students would come in having internalized everything you're just saying. Standardization. I think this anecdote is in the book. If it's not, it's in a previous book, Why They Can't Write. First day of class, in a first-year writing course, my student came to me with a notebook, and it had 3 pages of words and phrases written down, front and back, and then another page. And she said, can you look at this and tell me if it's okay? And I'm looking at them, I'm seeing words like although, and because, and in addition to. And they say, what are these? And she's like, these are transitions that my teachers had said are okay. Are they okay with you? And it was a big eye-opening for me because this was like a diligent student, like wants to know, how do I get a good grade in this class? She'd been charting the acceptable transitions through like all of high school. And I felt sort of a sadness for her that she'd never been allowed to express herself. And so some of it is, I spend time going to high schools and saying, stop doing this, do something differently. I also write things like, I wrote a piece advocating to abolish the College Board and stop accepting AP credits anywhere, ever, again. Parts because the College Board is horribly corrupt and big waste of money anyway, but also in terms of learning, it's a total disaster. The problem is when you do that, you have students who rely on credits from the College Board to be able to afford to go to college, right? And so we run into that system problem. We make college expensive. We created this sort of like workaround where you can get like a semester or more now of credits. I don't know if, do you guys accept a lot of AP here? Is it?
No. Thank you, Dean.
No. Yeah, I mean, like I would have students at College of Charleston who were sophomores the second they stepped into my class, and they're irritated that they're taking my class because they got a 4 on the composition AP exam, which was not accepted. Like, I shouldn't even be here. I'm like, you're lucky you're here because you would not be well prepared for the rest of your education. So this is, and part of it is like, I encourage students to be loud about this stuff too. Like, hey, I did all this stuff in high school. I did exactly what you wanted me to do. And I excelled. And then I got to college and my teacher said, none of that matters. What's up with that? Why are we allowing this to happen?
You're not asking me, but I'm going to chime in anyway, is the question, it is working now, right? And if it's working now in some of your classes here and you still want to unlearn it, how do you go about doing that? And I think if that's your question, the answer is like, stay as far away from ChatGPT as you can, and find things to write about that you're passionate about.
Yeah.
And, you know, if the 5-paragraph essay is the thing that you need to sort of structure the first attempts at doing that, go for it. And then see what happens as you expand away from it.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Like, one of the things I used to do when I was bored in school was like, make myself interested in the boring thing. Like my junior year of high school, I had to write like a term paper, like on a single author, where it's basically, it's so boring. It's like just a biographical paper. And so what I decided to do, because it was too boring, is I wrote my term paper in the style of the author I was studying, who was Tom Wolfe, the new journalist, and whose work I loved, even though I barely understood it, and was not for 16-year-olds. My teacher gave me a C- on it because he thought I'd lost my mind because I was writing in Tom Wolfe's style, which is not appropriate for the paper. I had never worked on something so hard in my life in high school. And it was the only time my dad, who was a lawyer and was like not the parent involved with the children parent, but he actually stayed home from work and I'm going to go talk to this guy. Because he read it and he's like, this is the best thing you've ever done. Finally, you're using your brain. Even in graduate school.
I'm going to interrupt you and say, so also the answer is find your readers, right?
Yeah.
If your reader isn't your teacher, bring it to me. I'm going to interrupt you just to say we're running out of time and I want to see if there are any other, Harper.
Hi, I wanted to pick up on a couple of themes. One is this sort of positive feedback loop where like technology has created some problems and then technology is creating solutions to those invented problems. And you talked about scarcity of time. And I've been thinking about like offloading. So people often say like, oh, in this environment where you have scarce time, you should think about what tasks are high value for you to do with your own brain and what tasks you can like outsource, right, to AI or I don't know, Google or whatever. And I've had some experiences where the tasks that would have seemed to be like whatever lower value are actually generative to me. Like I really like planning my schedule each week because then I get into a flow and I'm thinking about like what are my obligations, what are my commitments, what is the next step to do to realize this end that I've set, right? And then I think there are also ways to use AI to make those like low-value tasks actually more generative. For example, when I'm trying to wrangle like a new software that I'm learning to use, like figuring out how to convert, I don't know, PowerPoint to Google Slides or use Adobe InDesign or something, like I can do the dumb thing, which is like trial and error. Or I can go on Google, which I don't like doing because it's really inefficient and I have to like watch a 10-minute YouTube video to actually understand how to do it. Or I can actually go on to ChatGPT and I can explain what it is that I want to do and give a couple hypotheses for what I think might work, and it will give me like a good like next step. And so that elevates a process which would have been a kind of like dumb trial and error into something that's like a higher level of inquiry and engagement. And I think maybe an important thing about that example is like I'm using AI to better interact with technology. I'm not using AI to better interact with humans, right? So I think maybe AI is suited for that kind of task. But so there are a couple of thoughts I wanted to share, I guess. The questions would be like, one, like, do you see potential in offloading certain things to AI? Like, two, maybe picking up on your theme of like sort of cultivating individual human capacities, like, are there ways that AI can actually add value and make things more generative and get us into states of engagement and flow? Like, what are those things?
Yeah, no, those are excellent examples. I mean, that is a perfect example of agentic use of this, right? Where you're thinking, and I think the most important thing you said is the task to be offloaded is often non-obvious. The proper task to be offloaded is often non-obvious, where, as you say, the quote-unquote lower-level task is actually better described as a foundational task, right? You knowing your schedule. Like, it's a great example because, like, when I go on these trips, like, I have a person who, like, arranges my itinerary for me, and I don't look at it until, like, I'm on the plane going somewhere, and I often feel, like, a sense of panic because I didn't put it together. On the other hand, when I'm teaching a course, I'm like working that course plan for, you know, and I've taught the course for it, but I'm like 3 weeks before the semester starts, I'm thinking through every, like, we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do this, and maybe we'll read this and read this. So when people say, oh, I use it to do my syllabus, that makes no sense to me because like thinking about the syllabus is the fundamentals of teaching the course. And so we treat the syllabus as low because it's like this thing that, I mean, the joke is students aren't going to read it anyway, right? So it's like, why do we do that? But the process of the syllabus is where we think about our course. So what you're describing is a great tool of experimentation. And I love that distinction you make. It's like, yeah, like, oh, watching that YouTube video about converting is dumb, right? And because you put it on like double speed so you can get through it faster, but you can't follow it at double speed, so you have to go back, and it becomes hugely frustrating. And so the use of that tool to like streamline that production that allows you to get to the crux of it, that's fantastic. But the key is you are thinking through that in a very, very purposeful way, as opposed to the worst uses we're talking about, which is a reflexive, I don't know what to do here, I'm going to turn to this thing immediately so I get rid of this icky uncertainty and friction, rather than I have a problem to solve and maybe this tool can help me solve it.
The thing I like the most about what you said is that you ever get into the flow at all, right? And so if you're a student and you're experiencing flow, you're doing something right. So please keep doing it. I think we probably have time for one more question. If there is one. Yes, in the back. I can't see you.
Hi.
Hi.
My question, I'm imagining a future where everybody's using AI. How do we create systems that are kind to all of these people?
That are kind? Yeah. So in a future where everyone is using AI, how do we create systems that are kind to the people using AI?
To enable people to still encounter, different ways of thinking, and, how do we be accepting?
I mean, it's a good question. I don't think I have a great answer to, other than as a society and a culture, our behaviors and norms will evolve, and we have to be as purposeful as we can about it. I mean, I was just reading this afternoon, Meta, Facebook, whatever, is putting out their smart glasses, right? And we're going to have people walking around with these things. And 8 or 9 years ago, when Google tried to put out their glasses, sort of public disapproval caused them to abandon this. Now, partly they were ugly, so it was easy to tell that person has a camera pointed at me on their glasses. The Meta glasses look more like glasses, so we're going to have a harder time telling. I actually think we have to have some very strong arguments about this stuff, and arguments in a productive sense, like surface the issues, discuss them, come to some shared consensus, not necessarily agreement, but some shared understanding for these things. Because, like, if I'm teaching, I'm not letting a student record my class on their Meta glasses. I'm sorry, like, that's an invasion of our collective privacy for the community of my classroom. So it's going to be hard to think about these things, because I don't think there's going to be like hard and fast lines. And there's likely to be, it's extremely unlikely we're going to have strong laws or regulation about this stuff until many, many horses are out of the barn and we see very, very bad outcomes that get reined in. I mean, think of like cell phones in classes, right? Like a decade after somebody would have said this could be a problem, we now see collective action about it. So the sooner we start thinking about these things, the better.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Happy to talk individually with folks afterwards.